questions or comments? Here we go. Okay, so we'll get started. Good evening, ladies. You probably have seen recently, the past few weeks have been very eventful. There's been a lot going on, especially in the east of Europe. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has really dominated the news cycle. And it can be a bit overwhelming at times. The situation keeps changing and we feel like we're constantly behind the news. But I have to say that I felt that I was actually at a little bit of an advantage this time when these events happened, because I had recently read a book about the Black Sea. So I understood the dynamic in the area quite well, even though I don't fully understand what's going on in President Putin's head. Now, as I said, I read a book recently, which was written by a German journalist and writer called Jens Mühling. And a couple of years ago, Jens Mühling decided that he was going to travel around the Black Sea and find out more about the people who live there, the different cultures, and so on. And I would like to share some of his findings with you today. Now, I'm sure you all know where the Black Sea is. It's a sea which straddles Europe and Asia. It's surrounded by a number of different countries, but I'll come to the list a little bit later on. I'd first like to talk a little bit about the name. Now, some geographical features have different names in different languages, but the Black Sea is pretty much the same in every language. And there are several theories as to why it's known as the Black Sea. The first one is that the water looks dark. It's not as transparent or beautifully blue as the Mediterranean. The second theory is that it's often covered by dark clouds. The third theory is that the beaches along the Black Sea have dark sand. And the fourth one, as a bit of a language geek, I have to say this is my favorite theory, and that is that the word for black and the word for north in some ancient languages was the same. So the people who lived to the south of the Black Sea called it the Black Sea, but they were actually calling it the North Sea. Now, I promised you a list of countries before surrounding the Black Sea, so here we go. There are 6 countries in total: Ukraine, Russia, Georgia, Turkey, Bulgaria, and Romania. The total coastline around the Black Sea is 5,800 kilometers. And of this 5,800 kilometers, Ukraine has the lion's share of the coastline, around 2,800 kilometers, whilst Romania has the shortest coastline, only around 200 kilometers. There are several industries in the area of the Black Sea, fishing, obviously, but also hydrocarbons. So, for example, drilling for oil, drilling for gas, a very hot topic at the moment, where we're going to get our energy from. And then, of course, there's tourism as well, because the Black Sea is located in the southernmost and sunniest part of some countries. So, for example, the Russians often go on holiday to the Black Sea because it's the warmest and sunniest part of Russia. But the Black Sea is of no interest whatsoever to the Turks because it's in the northernmost and coldest and darkest part of their country. They prefer to go to the Mediterranean instead. Now, the area around the Black Sea is really a melting pot of different languages, cultures, and religions. People's ethnicity, language, and nationality don't always tally up. So, for example, you have ethnic Ukrainians who are living in Romania. You have people who speak Turkish as their mother tongue, but they live in Bulgaria. And then there are some other ethnic groups who don't have a country of their own. I'm thinking here of the Tartars, for example, who live in part of Ukraine. This intermingling of different cultures means that it's a very interesting and very rich part of the world, but it's also led to a great deal of conflict. And it means that there are a lot of disputed territories around the Black Sea, probably the most famous of which is Crimea. Crimea is a peninsula, I'm sure you know, which was formerly part of Ukraine. But then in 2014, the Russians invaded Crimea. And in his book, Mr. Mühling doesn't talk about the politics or who was right or who was wrong, but rather he looks at the consequences of this invasion for the people living there. So now there is a hard border between Crimea and Ukraine. Before, you had people who were living in another part of Ukraine, but who worked in Crimea. They worked in a large factory. And all of these people lost their jobs because of this border. All of a sudden, they were living in a foreign country. They didn't have the right paperwork. They didn't have time every day to cross the border. So you see that many people lost their jobs because of the invasion. And then there was another example which I liked from the book, which was of a married couple. You had a Russian man married to a Ukrainian woman, and they faced a number of problems, a number of personal problems, but also professional problems because of the invasion. One example was that the wife was a television presenter working for Ukrainian television, and she was reporting in Ukrainian while Crimea was still part of Ukraine. And then all of a sudden, the television station was closed down completely because you were no longer allowed to broadcast in Ukrainian. So this put a certain strain on their relationship as well. Now, there are all sorts of other problems facing the area around the Black Sea. There's high unemployment, the treatment of certain minorities like the Roma, or a number of environmental problems. But those will all be topics for another speech. Thank you very much.